The year 2157 started like any other year for humanity, but it would end as the most important year in human history. Captain James Mitchell floated in the command chair of the ESS Endeavour, Earth's first ship capable of traveling faster than light. After months of testing the new drive system, they were finally ready to make contact with whatever waited among the stars. Mitchell was a calm man who had spent 20 years in Earth's space navy. He had seen wars, disasters, and the best and worst of humanity. But nothing had prepared him for what appeared on his ship's main screen that Tuesday morning. The hologram was beautiful and terrible at the same time. A creature made of living crystal stood before them, its body catching light and throwing rainbows across the bridge. When it spoke, its voice was like wind chimes mixed with the sound of breaking glass. "Greetings, primitive species of the third planet," it said without any warmth or friendliness. "Your world has been catalogued. You are now Category 7 beings with basic space travel ability. This means you belong to the Saurid hegemony. You will pay tribute starting in 30 of your days." Mitchell felt his stomach drop. This was not the peaceful first contact that Earth had hoped for. The crystal being continued speaking like it was reading from a shopping list. "Your tribute will be 1,000 tons of rare metals, 500 tons of manufactured goods, and 10,000 of your people for work assignments. This is not a request. This is how things work in our galaxy." The hologram flickered and showed images that made Mitchell's crew gasp in horror. Worlds burning. Cities destroyed. Millions of people being loaded onto ships like cattle. The crystal being's voice never changed tone as it explained what happened to planets that refused to pay. "These worlds thought they could say no," it said, showing the destruction. "We corrected their thinking. You have 30 days to begin payment. Welcome to the galaxy." The transmission ended, leaving Mitchell and his crew staring at a blank screen. Behind them, Lieutenant Rebecca Stone was already working at her station, trying to trace where the signal had come from. Her face was pale and her hands shook as she typed. "Sir," she said quietly, "that signal came from everywhere. They're watching us from hundreds of different points around our solar system." Back on Earth, Admiral Robert Hayes stood in the emergency meeting room deep under the North American Defense Command. Around the table sat the leaders of every major nation on Earth. The same holographic message had been received by every government on the planet at exactly the same time. "They're treating us like we're animals," said President Maria Santos, her voice tight with anger. "Like we're some primitive tribe that just discovered fire." "Maybe we are," replied Chancellor Heinrich Müller sadly. "Look at what they showed us. They can destroy entire worlds. We just learned how to leave our solar system last month." Admiral Hayes had been quiet during most of the meeting, but now he stood up. He was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from his early days as a fighter pilot. When he spoke, everyone listened. "I've been in the military for 40 years, he said slowly. "I've fought in 3 wars and seen humanity at its best and worst. But I've never seen us give up when someone tried to make us slaves. I don't plan to start now." "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" asked the Secretary General of the United Nations. "I'm suggesting we do what humans have always done when someone tries to push us around," Hayes replied. "We push back." Dr. Emily Watson, Earth's leading expert on alien life, had been studying the transmission for hours. She was a small woman with thick glasses who had spent her entire career wondering what aliens might be like. Now she knew, and it terrified her. "The psychological profile is clear," she told the Emergency Science Committee. "They don't see us as intelligent beings. We're resources to them. Like trees or oil wells. They harvest us when they need us." "But why?" asked Dr. Richard Park, the head of the space program. "Why not trade with us? Work with us?" "Because they don't have to," Watson replied. "They have all the power. This galaxy isn't ruled by laws or democracy. It's ruled by whoever has the biggest weapons. And right now that's not us." Captain Mitchell's ship had been shadowing alien vessels for 2 weeks, staying hidden and learning what they could. What they discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. The aliens had incredible technology, but they were lazy. They expected everything to go according to plan because it always had. "They're like a bully who's never been punched in the face," Mitchell told his crew during their daily briefing. "They think everyone will just give up because that's what's always happened before." "But sir," asked Engineer Tom Bradley, "what if they're right? What if we can't fight them?" Mitchell looked around at his crew. These were good people who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history. They had left behind families and comfortable lives to explore the unknown. They were the best humanity had to offer. "Maybe we can't win a fair fight," Mitchell said. "But who said anything about fighting fair? They expect us to roll over and show our bellies like beaten dogs. Instead, we're going to show them something they've never seen before. What's that, sir? Mitchell smiled, but it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just realized he was hungrier than he thought. We're going to show them what humans do to bullies. The message went out across Earth that night. In 1,000 languages, it said the same thing: 30 days to surrender or 30 years to regret it. Choose wisely. The galaxy had ruled through fear for millions of years. But they had never tried to frighten a species that had invented the concept of spite. 3 years passed, and to the galaxy, Earth looked like every other conquered world. Tribute ships left on schedule every month, carrying precious metals and manufactured goods to Sword collection points. Human diplomats attended Galactic Confederation meetings, speaking only when asked direct questions and always agreeing with whatever the stronger species decided. The Sword hegemony barely thought about humans anymore. They were just another entry in the tax collection database, filed between the gas-breathing Metharians and the slug-like Viscoids. Earth paid on time, caused no trouble, and seemed to understand their place in the galactic order. Captain Thomas Bradley commanded what appeared to be a simple merchant vessel, the cargo ship New Horizon. His official job was transporting Earth's tribute payments and bringing back approved alien goods. His real job was much more interesting. Approaching Sword Station Gamma 7, announced his navigator, Lieutenant Sarah Collins. On the surface, she looked like any other ship's officer. In reality, she was one of Earth's best intelligence analysts, with a perfect memory and the ability to speak 17 alien languages. "Remember, we're just dumb humans who are grateful for the protection of our betters," Bradley said quietly to his crew. "Act impressed by everything, ask obvious questions, and let them think we're harmless." The Sword Station was massive, a dark metal construction that could house 1,000,000 beings. Weapon platforms jutted out from every surface like the spines of a sea urchin. It was designed to intimidate, and it worked on most species. Bradley docked his ship and went through the usual inspection routine. The Sword officer who checked his cargo was typical of his species, 8 feet tall, covered in dark scales with teeth like a shark. He looked at Bradley the way a farmer might look at a pig. "Human cargo servant," the Sword said in badly pronounced English. "Your tribute is acceptable. You may trade in the lower markets only. Do not approach military sections or you will be eliminated." "Of course, Great One," Bradley replied, bowing his head like a submissive child. "We are honored to serve the mighty hegemony." What the Sword didn't know was that Bradley's ship was recording everything, every weapon placement, every security protocol, every weakness in the station's design. Hidden sensors mapped the internal structure while his crew memorized patrol schedules and emergency procedures. The lower markets were where the galaxy's second-class citizens conducted business. Bradley walked among beings from hundreds of different worlds, all of them careful to keep their voices down and their eyes lowered. This was where the real intelligence gathering happened. "The collective is having problems with Sector 15 again," whispered a small furry trader who looked like a cross between a rabbit and a spider. 3 hive queens died in transport accidents this month. Very suspicious accidents. The Nexari are worried about something, added a crystal being similar to the one who had first contacted Earth. They've been purging their data cores and restricting information access. Something has them scared. Bradley filed away every piece of information while pretending to be interested only in buying basic supplies. To any observer, he was just another primitive human trying to understand the sophisticated galactic economy. Meanwhile, Dr. Emily Watson was conducting her own research in the diplomatic quarters of New Geneva Station, one of the few neutral zones in the galaxy. She had spent 3 years studying alien psychology and her findings were remarkable. "They're all children," she told Admiral Hayes during one of their encrypted communications. "Not intellectually, they're very smart. But emotionally, they've never had to grow up. They've been the dominant species for so long that they can't imagine anyone challenging them." "What do you mean?" Hayes asked from his hidden command center on Luna. "Think about it, Admiral. Most of these species achieved space travel because older races gave them the technology. They never had to struggle for it, never had to innovate under pressure. They're like kids who inherited their parents' business. They know how to run it, but they don't really understand it." Watson's research had revealed something that would prove crucial in the coming conflict. The galaxy's great powers were psychologically unprepared for real resistance. They had spent millennia dealing with species that either submitted immediately or were crushed so quickly that they never learned from their mistakes. The breaking point came during what history would remember as the Vega Station incident. Captain Margaret Collins was transporting medical supplies to a plague-stricken world when her ship was intercepted by Sword raiders demanding inspection fees, which everyone knew was just another word for theft. Collins was different from the diplomatic crews. She had volunteered for the merchant service after losing her brother in the first alien contact. She carried a grudge against the galaxy's bullies, and today that grudge had reached its limit. "Attention Sword vessels," she broadcast on an open channel that half the system could hear. "You want my cargo? Come and take it." What followed was the first time in living memory that anyone had seen a human fight. Collins' ship was a converted freighter with minimal weapons, facing a squadron of military raiders. The outcome should have been decided in minutes. Instead, it turned into a 3-hour nightmare that left alien observers speechless. Collins used her cargo as weapons, ramming containers full of metal or into enemy ships. When her main drive was hit, she vented atmosphere to create a makeshift smokescreen. When the Swords tried to board her ship, they found that humans could fight hand-to-hand with a viciousness that their warrior culture had never prepared them for. Collins died when her ship finally exploded, but she took 2 sword raiders with her. More importantly, the entire battle was recorded by news drones and broadcast across the galactic networks. For the first time in centuries, subject species saw someone fight back. Not just resist, fight with fury and determination and an absolute refusal to surrender. The recording spread through underground networks faster than the authorities could stop it. A new word entered the galactic vocabulary: defiance. Most species had to create new sounds just to pronounce it, because the concept had been extinct for so long that their languages had no equivalent. The major powers dismissed Collins as a crazy individual, an aberration that proved nothing about human nature. They were wrong, but they wouldn't realize their mistake until it was far too late. The Saurid hegemony's patience with humanity finally broke in the winter of 2163. Reports had been trickling in for months about human advisors, appearing on client worlds, teaching strange new concepts like guerrilla warfare and asymmetric tactics. Worse, Earth's tribute ships had been caught smuggling defensive weapons to oppress species across 3 different sectors. Overlord Krex there stood in his war chamber aboard the massive dreadnought Bone Crusher, staring at intelligence reports that made his blood boil. Humans were spreading like a disease through his empire, infecting his subjects with dangerous ideas about resistance and freedom. "They think they can hide behind their pathetic little planet?" he growled to his fleet commander. "Time to remind the galaxy what happens to species that forget their place." The punishment fleet that assembled in the dark space beyond Pluto was the largest military force ever sent against a single world. 300 warships, each one capable of cracking a planet's crust. The plan was simple and brutal: destroy Earth's orbital infrastructure, kill anyone who resisted, and relocate the survivors to labor camps as an example to other potential rebels. Admiral Robert Hayes watched the enemy fleet approach from Luna Command, humanity's secret military headquarters buried deep beneath the moon's surface. For 6 years, Earth had been preparing for this moment. Every tribute payment had bought them precious time. Every diplomatic humiliation had been endured for this single chance. "All units, this is Admiral Hayes," he broadcast on the emergency military channel. "Execute Broken Chain. Show them what happens when you corner a human." The battle for Earth began not with massive ship-to-ship combat, but with something the Swords had never experienced: coordinated guerrilla warfare in space. Human vessels emerged from hiding places throughout the solar system like angry wasps from a disturbed nest. Captain David Reynolds commanded the destroyer HMS Defiance, one of 50 ships that had been hiding in the asteroid belt for 2 years. His crew had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission, but they faced it with the grim humor that had carried humanity through countless wars. "Target the supply ships first," Reynolds ordered as his squadron burst from their hiding places. "Let the big boys run on empty." The Swords had brought enough firepower to destroy 100 Earths, but they had made one critical mistake: they had planned for a traditional battle between fleets. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow any rules. Human ships attacked in small groups, hitting supply lines and communication relays before vanishing back into the void. They used nuclear mines disguised as space debris. They hacked Saurid computer systems and filled their networks with false orders and propaganda broadcasts. Most shocking of all, when human ships were cornered and about to be destroyed, their crews would ram the nearest enemy vessel while singing their national anthems. Commander Lisa Morgan led a squadron of fighter craft against a Saurid battle cruiser 10 times their size. When her pilots ran out of missiles, they didn't retreat, they flew their ships directly into the enemy's weapon ports, detonating their fuel tanks to cause maximum damage. "For Earth!" Morgan screamed as her fighter pierced the cruiser's hull. The explosion took out the ship's main gun and killed 300 Saurid warriors. Overlord Krexthar watched his perfectly planned invasion turn into chaos. His ships were dying faster than his tactical computers could process. The humans fought with a ferocity that defied all military logic. They actually seemed to welcome death if it meant taking enemies with them. "They're insane," he told his bridge crew as another human ship exploded inside his formation. "No rational species fights like this." He was wrong. Humans weren't insane, they were desperate, and desperation had always brought out both the best and worst in their species. They fought not just for their own survival but for the right to remain free. Captain James Mitchell, now commanding a heavy cruiser called Retribution, found himself facing impossible odds when 3 Sword dreadnoughts surrounded his ship. His weapons were nearly exhausted, his armor was failing, and his crew was down to half strength. "Captain," his communications officer reported, "Admiral Hayes is ordering all ships to fall back to the secondary defensive line." Mitchell looked around his battered bridge at the faces of men and women who had followed him into hell. They were tired, scared, and hurt, but their eyes still burned with determination. "Send a message to Admiral Hayes," Mitchell said calmly. "Tell him we're exactly where we want to be." The Retribution's final charge became the stuff of legend. Mitchell aimed his dying ship directly at the largest Sword dreadnought and pushed his engines past their safety limits. The resulting explosion was visible from Mars and took out all 3 enemy vessels. But the humans' greatest weapon wasn't their willingness to die, it was their refusal to give up. When Captain Susan Blake's ship lost all power, she and her crew suited up and continued the fight using hand weapons and improvised explosives. When the Swords boarded their vessel, they found humans who fought in the corridors like trapped animals, turning every room into a deadly maze. The battle raged for 18 hours. Earth's orbital defenses were shattered, its space elevators destroyed, its satellite networks reduced to glowing debris. But the Sword Punishment Fleet suffered something unprecedented in their military history: total defeat. Of the 300 ships that had arrived to crush humanity, fewer than 50 limped away from the Sol system. The rest were either destroyed or captured by human boarding parties who had proven that sometimes, primitive weapons wielded by determined fighters could overcome advanced technology operated by overconfident bullies. Admiral Hayes surveyed the wreckage of his planet's infrastructure with mixed emotions. Earth had paid a terrible price, but they had achieved something miraculous: they had won. More importantly, they had proven that the galaxy's great powers could be beaten. The news of humanity's victory spread faster than light across the galactic networks. For the first time in recorded history, a client species had not just resisted their masters, they had destroyed them utterly. The impossible had happened, and every oppressed being in the galaxy took notice. The age of unquestioned alien dominance was over. The age of human defiance had begun. The destruction of the Sword Punishment Fleet sent waves of panic through every major power in the galaxy. Emergency councils met on dozens of homeworlds as species that had ruled for millennia tried to understand what had just happened. A primitive client world had not just defeated their overlords, they had wiped them out completely. High Admiral Zeph Corvain of the Crystalline Nexery stood before the Grand Assembly, his translucent body flickering with nervous energy. Around him floated representatives from 17 different species, all united by one terrifying realization: if humans could destroy the Swords, they could destroy anyone. "The threat must be eliminated immediately," Corvain declared, his voice ringing like struck crystal. "We cannot allow this infection of rebellion to spread. Every day we delay, more worlds will think they can resist us." The collective's Hive Queen spoke through 1,000 voices at once, creating a sound like a swarm of angry insects. "Our analysis indicates the humans used psychological warfare combined with asymmetric tactics. They fought without regard for military protocol or self-preservation. This makes them unpredictable and extremely dangerous. Even the ancient Primarchs, energy beings who rarely concern themselves with mortal affairs, sent observers to the emergency session. Their representative appeared as a shifting pillar of light that hurt to look at directly. 'The balance has been disturbed,' it said in words that bypassed the ears and spoke directly to the mind. 'Order must be restored. The children must remember their place.' The solution seemed obvious: combine their fleets into the largest military force in galactic history and crush Earth so thoroughly that no world would ever dare rebel again. Within weeks, over 10,000 warships began gathering at rally points throughout known space. But Admiral Robert Hayes had not spent 6 years preparing to defend Earth alone. Hidden throughout the outer solar system, massive shipyards had been producing vessels designed specifically for the kind of warfare that had just shocked the galaxy. More importantly, human intelligence agents had been studying their enemies for years, mapping not just their military capabilities but their psychological weaknesses. Commander Rachel Stone led the first phase of humanity's counterattack. While the coalition assembled their massive fleet, her ghost ships had been moving into position around key enemy installations across 40 different star systems. They were about to learn that humans had a very different idea of what constituted a fair fight. Dr. Emily Watson, now serving as strategic psychological advisor to the human military, had spent 3 years creating detailed profiles of every major alien species. Her research had revealed something crucial: each race that had achieved dominance had also developed critical mental vulnerabilities. The collective fears isolation above all else, she briefed the strike team commanders from her underground laboratory on Luna. They've been connected to the hive mind for so long that individual consciousness terrifies them. The Nexari fear ignorance and confusion. Their entire culture is built around perfect information. The Saurids who remain fear appearing weak in front of their subordinates more than they fear death. The human strikes began simultaneously across the galaxy at exactly 0300 Galactic Standard Time. But instead of attacking military targets, they went for something much more effective: the psychological foundations that held alien civilizations together. Captain William Barnes commanded the assault on the collective's primary nursery world of Breeding Ground Alpha. His squadron of stealth fighters penetrated the planet's defenses not to destroy the Hive Queen's chambers, but to broadcast a simple message directly into the minds of every drone on the planet. "You are alone," the message said in the collective's own mental language. "The hive mind is dead. You are the only one left. You will die alone in the dark." The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Millions of collective drones, faced with the impossible concept of individual existence, began to shut down. Some went catatonic. Others started attacking their own hive mates in panic. Within hours, the planet's entire military infrastructure had collapsed as the beings responsible for maintaining it simply stopped functioning. Similar attacks struck at the heart of every major power simultaneously. Human cyber warfare specialists infected Nexari data networks with viruses that corrupted their precious information, filling their databases with contradictory facts and impossible paradoxes. The crystal beings, faced with information they couldn't verify or trust, began to withdraw from their networks entirely. Saurid military academies found themselves under assault by human boarding parties who broadcast their victories live across the Empire's communication networks. The sight of their supposedly invincible warriors being defeated by primitive aliens in hand-to-hand combat triggered authority crises throughout the hegemony's remaining territories. Captain Susan Blake led one of the most audacious attacks in military history, a direct assault on Coalition Command Central with only 50 human ships. They faced over 1,000 defenders, but the aliens were already psychologically defeated before the first shot was fired. "They're not warriors," Blake observed as enemy formations began to break apart in confusion. "They're administrators with weapons. They've been playing at war for so long they've forgotten what the real thing looks like." The coalition's grand strategy depended on unity and coordination between species that had spent centuries viewing each other as rivals. Human psychological warfare shattered that unity by reminding them of every old grudge, every territorial dispute, every reason they had to distrust each other. When the massive enemy fleet finally moved toward Earth, it was already falling apart. Ancient rivalries resurfaced as species began blaming each other for the human attacks on their homeworlds. The Nexari accused the collective of security failures. The remaining Saurids claimed the crystal beings had deliberately leaked intelligence to the humans. Admiral Hayes watched the approaching armada through his command center's main display and smiled grimly. The largest military force in galactic history was tearing itself apart before it even reached the battlefield. "All units," he broadcast to his assembled fleet, "the enemy is doing half our work for us. Let's finish the job." The battle for Earth's future was about to begin, but in many ways, it was already over. The humans had proven something that the galaxy's rulers had forgotten over millions of years of easy dominance: fear was a weapon that cut both ways, and sometimes the prey could become the predator. 2 years after the Coalition's failed invasion, Admiral William Hayes stood on the observation deck of the flagship Indomitable, watching history unfold before his eyes. Where massive Saurid dreadnoughts once patrolled as symbols of oppression, human peacekeeping vessels now glided silently through space, their crews ready to respond to calls for help from any species that requested assistance. The old galactic order had crumbled faster than anyone thought possible. The Saurid hegemony had collapsed into civil war as former slave species threw off their chains and settled old scores. The collective's hive queens found themselves negotiating with individual drones who had learned to think for themselves. The Nexari information networks, once tools of control, now carried revolutionary ideas about freedom and democracy to every corner of known space. Captain Victoria Price commanded the peacekeeping fleet over what had once been hegemony space. Her daily reports painted a picture of chaos transforming into hope. Former slave worlds were learning to govern themselves, often making mistakes but always growing stronger through the process. "Admiral," Price transmitted during their weekly briefing, "the Altarians just held their first democratic election. Turnout was 98%. They're asking for human advisors to help them write a constitution." Hayes nodded, remembering when these same worlds had cowered under alien rule just months earlier. The transformation wasn't always smooth, centuries of oppression couldn't be undone overnight, but it was real and it was spreading. Not everyone welcomed the changes. Deep in the space between galaxies, the ancient Primarchs stirred from their cosmic meditation. These beings of pure energy had shaped galactic civilization for over 1,000,000 years, and they did not appreciate having their careful work undone by primitive mammals. The Primarchs materialized their vast forms around Earth's solar system, their presence bending space and time itself. Stars flickered as they passed. Planets shifted slightly in their orbits. When they spoke, their words echoed in the minds of every living being within 100 light-years. Mortal children of the Third World, their collective voice resonated across dimensions. "You have disrupted the balance we have maintained since your species was learning to use tools. This chaos ends now. Submit and we will restore the proper order." Admiral Hayes received their ultimatum while standing in the command center that had once been hidden beneath Luna's surface. Around him, his staff worked quietly, monitoring the massive energy readings that marked the Primarch's presence. These beings could manipulate matter and energy on a scale that made human weapons look like toys. "Sir," his communications officer reported nervously, "they're demanding an immediate response. They want unconditional surrender and the restoration of the old tribute system." Hayes looked around at the faces of men and women who had helped transform humanity from galactic newcomers into the most feared military force in known space. They had faced impossible odds before and emerged victorious. This would be no different. "Send them a message," Hayes said calmly. "Tell them they've had their 1,000,000 years of ruling the galaxy. It's our turn now." The confrontation between humanity and the Primarchs was unlike anything in recorded history. These beings didn't fight with ships or weapons, they reshaped reality itself. Solar systems rearranged themselves at their whim. Time moved in strange loops around their massive forms. They expected humanity to break under the weight of forces beyond mortal comprehension. Instead, they found something they had never encountered in their cosmic existence, a species that had already been broken and had rebuilt itself stronger than before. Humans had faced extinction and chosen to fight anyway. They had been outgunned, outnumbered, and outmatched at every turn, yet still found ways to win. Dr. Emily Watson, now elderly but still serving as humanity's chief advisor on alien psychology, provided the crucial insight during an emergency strategy session. "They're ancient, but they're also stagnant," she explained to the gathered military leaders. "They've spent so long at the top of the cosmic food chain that they've forgotten how to adapt. We've spent our entire existence as underdogs. Adaptation is what we do best." The Primarchs attacked not with violence but with inevitability. They simply began to restore the old order by rewriting the fundamental laws of physics in their local area of space. Human ships found their engines failing, their weapons powerless, their communications cut off from Earth. But humanity responded in the most human way possible. They improvised. When their advanced technology failed, they fell back on simpler methods. When their ships couldn't move, their crews suited up and continued the fight on foot. When the Primarchs altered reality around them, humans adapted to the new reality faster than their enemies could change it again. The turning point came when Captain Helen Foster, commanding a damaged destroyer that had lost all power, managed to establish direct contact with one of the Primarchs. Instead of begging for mercy or trying to negotiate, she did something that had never occurred to the cosmic beings in their 1,000,000 years of existence. She asked them why. "Why do you want to rule us?" Foster transmitted through a hand-cranked radio system that somehow reached across dimensions. "What do you get out of keeping entire civilizations as slaves? Are you that afraid of letting others be free?" The question struck the Primarchs like a physical blow. In all their eons of existence, no mortal had ever asked them to justify their actions. They had simply assumed their right to rule was natural and eternal. Faced with a species that questioned even gods, they found themselves unable to provide an answer. The Primarchs withdrew not because they were defeated in battle, but because they were confused by something they couldn't understand or control. Humanity had presented them with a concept their ancient minds couldn't process, the idea that power without consent was not strength but weakness. Commander Jack Morrison, now governing former coalition territories, summed up the new reality in his final report to Earth Command. "They don't fear our weapons anymore, Admiral. They fear our unpredictability. For millions of years, they created a universe where everyone knew their place and change happened slowly by permission only. We've shown them there's another way to live." The galaxy's fear of humanity had evolved beyond mere military might. Other species now feared something far more dangerous to established power: the human tendency to question everything, to refuse to accept that "this is how things have always been" was a valid reason for anything, and their disturbing habit of treating impossible challenges as interesting problems to solve. Hayes smiled as he watched human patrol ships respond to a distress call from a world that had once paid tribute to the Saurids. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again, but more importantly, it would never be the same. Freedom, once released, was impossible to contain.